Yes.
Take notes on the back of it?
Yeah, it's yours. You've heard both of these terms before, theme and motif. You've heard them in this class. You've heard theme, and we've discussed theme in this very unit. However, it's been my experience that students still face challenges in dealing with both of these terms and other terms like symbol very correctly and analytically. So I need to review some of these terms again. We want to apply them to Shakespeare. We want to pay attention to what you did in group activity number 1, looking at thematic conflicts. But we require a revisitation of these terms in order for you to understand clearly what they mean. I hear students making mistakes with these all the time, good students. I hear teachers making mistakes with these. I've read critical interpretation of literature that does not draw a difference between theme and motif. But they're different words. They have different definitions. What do you understand a motif to be? Philip has already hit the first and most important part of the definition, repetition. Motif requires repetition. It happens again and again and again. Any other aspects of the definition that we know?
Well, I think this is theme, but like an abstract idea.
Motif can be abstract, but it doesn't need to be. Theme always is. Okay. What is motif? It's a repeated what? Could be. What else could it be? Has any of you heard the term motif connected to something other than literature, like music or visual arts? Yeah, Logan, where have you heard it connected?
I think it was like an art. It was like inspiration or something for it.
Okay.
Like the reason.
Visual arts, you should have heard the term motif. Motif is repetition in the visual arts of a color, of a shape, of a certain line, of a certain composition. In the visual arts, you're just talking about repetition of something. Shape, line, color, pattern. Same thing happens in music. You could talk about a musical motif, repetition of a certain line of melody, maybe very short. Repetition of something. You know that I tell you not to use the word thing because you can usually use something else. I'm using the word thing because I want it to be general. Could be just about anything. In Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, he repeats the phrase, and so it goes, again and again and again throughout. It's a motif. How many of you have seen The Ring? A few of you. What is the visual motif in The Ring? What image repeats again and again and again? The ring. The circle. There's a circle. There's a ring. There's a circle that repeats in numerous areas. Sometimes it flashes on the screen. Sometimes something happens like somebody lifts up a cup and it leaves a ring stain below it. But in some way or another, the ring, that circle motif, repeats again and again and again. Now, those of you who've seen the film, what's the purpose? What is it doing? Well, the movie's all about rings, Mr. Clarkson. Rings in all their various forms. It's a meditation on ringdom and ringness and ringosity.
People get married in it?
No. No. Bad. It's a horror film. Bad things happen. Zach. That's correct. It is predicting or foreshadowing something bad that will happen. And those of you who've seen the film know what happens in that well. And the ring turns out to be the lip of a well. It's foreshadowing. It creates suspension and tension. As an audience member, you know the ring is associated with something disastrous, but you don't know what. So the repetition of that is a suspense device. That motif has no real meaning. Its only purpose is to create suspense. So here's a lot of verbiage that gets to a definition, and you can write this down verbatim, as many of you would like to. But I'd like you also to note where I emphasize this definition. Undeveloped. It does not have meaning in and of itself. The ring motif in the ring has no actual meaning in and of itself. It helps something else. Suspense. And suspense is meaning. It's an emotional reaction in the audience. That has content. That is real. The ring motif is used to develop that. That means it acts as a tool. It's subordinate to something else. It recurs again and again and again, and I don't quite know what it might be. It develops something else, more importantly. Sometimes it helps develop a character. In the Ring case, we're talking about the plot. In Shakespeare's case, we'll be talking about themes. How motif will be used to help develop a theme. So if you're in the Taming of the Shrew, Taming of the Shrew people, what do you constantly hear analogies to? And you might think, how would I know? Because it's as simple as the title on the book. Animals in general. Shrews and other animals. And you'll hear references to animals, and you'll hear comparisons to animals time and time again in a number of different cases. Different people comparing other people to animals. And of course, the entire title is a master analogy. A Merchant of Venice. You should see a repetition of money over and over and over again. Now this should pique your interest. And you'd say, wow, man, Shakespeare's got an obsession with money in this play. Is the play about money? No, plays are not about money. We don't care about money. It's a tool for some other use. So here's the relationship. The motif helps develop something else. It's subordinate. Could be theme, could be character, could be plot. We'll be dealing with theme today when we talk about Shakespeare. But it's important to understand that in your literary analysis claim, in this play, Shakespeare uses this to do this. It'll figure in the device position. Could you put it in the effect position somehow? Sure. But in the discussions that you'll be having, you'll have it in the device position. Theme. What do you understand theme to be that is different?
Always an abstract idea.
Always an abstract idea. Always has meaning in and of itself. That means it's an effect, not a device. It is developed throughout. It's consistently developed throughout the entire piece of literature. The main message, the main abstract message, has meaning and content in and of itself. I've told you sometime in this class that theme should be expressible how? Some people say, hey, the theme of this novel is revenge, and I look at them and say, no, it's not. Can't be. What's the theme of a separate piece? Nope. Nope. Confusion abounds. Theme is expressible as a complete sentence. A thematic comment, if you will. If I am talking about a theme, then I'm talking about an author's personal observation about human nature, and it's always about human nature. And that observation should be expressible as a complete sentence. Don't just say the novel's about love. Tell me what the novelist is saying about love, or revenge, or growing up. What is John Knowles saying about growing up and evolution and all that good stuff in a separate piece? Abby?
He's saying that if you don't evolve off like the parents.
That's right. Lepper's direct quotation, everything has to evolve or else it perishes. You must change and adapt or else you will die in one way or another. That's a complete sentence and that's a complete thought. So when we talk about theme, we're talking about this general idea that's developed throughout the entire piece. It has content and meaning of itself. It's expressible as a complete sentence. And it is always talking about human nature. We don't write poems, plays, or novels about trees because we don't care about them. We write about ourselves. We write about human experience. And if we take for our subject, a tree, that's all well and good. However, it must relate to us in some way and the experience of being human. To break this down really simply for motif and theme, theme is what we're talking about, motif is how we're talking about it. I don't think I could make it any simpler than that. Theme is the what, motif is the how. Perhaps in Merchant of Venice, I use money to discuss law and mercy. So money is my vehicle, it's my tool to discuss the difference between law and mercy. Perhaps in Twelfth Night, I use clothing and costuming and disguises to talk about duty to society. In Taming of the Shrew, perhaps I use animal imagery and animal analogies to talk about obedience and obedience to social rules. All of those connections make sense. So all of those relate. Money does relate to law. Animals do relate to obedience. And clothing does relate to duty and social expectation. Theme, of course, is the effect. So we're looking at the, once again, to emphasize, this is the what, and motif would be the how, or the how we express that. Shakespeare is perfect for this because Shakespeare is, I don't want to say complex, I want to use the word fertile or fruitful. That means there's so much to talk about in there. You'd be amazed at how many layers of complicated meaning are available in Shakespeare. You could read Shakespeare on numerous levels. You can be entertained on a very simple level just by the story, or you can be entertained as an academic and as an analyst, just looking at his language use and the development of all these different literary techniques on a number of different levels. And of course, that's where we're going to dabble, because we don't want to be entertained, we want to be educated. Here's your first step in dealing with it. Identify patterns. Look for something that repeats over and over and over again. Shakespeare's not very subtle about this. Measure for measure people. What repeats over and over and over again, and it seems like he's obsessed with it throughout the entire play? Come on, measure for measure people. Are you just afraid of saying it? What repeats over and over throughout that play? Thank you very much. Sex. That's okay. It's all right. You can't read measure for measure unless you're talking about sex. Now, Tempest people in Act 4, there are going to be some references to premarital sex, but they're not pervasive. It means that they're not strung throughout the entire play. There's just a momentary reference to Ferdinand and Miranda and how they better wait for their wedding night before they do anything. But measure for measure, from almost the first moment to the last moment, it's talking about sex. That's a pattern. That's a repetition. We see something happening again and again and again. Midsummer Night's Dream. What seems to happen over and over again? Or what do you hear repeated? Yeah. People are falling in love all the time, constantly. And often there are mistakes associated. So we have two different ideas, love and mistakes. So we've identified repetition. Now, is this a motif or a theme? Well, let's see. Measure for measure, folks. Do you think he's writing about sex, or do you think he's using sex to write about something more important? I'd say so too. Trust me, fictional authors have written about sex just as a theme, just to explore sex and sexuality, and sometimes very maturely and sometimes very immaturely, but Shakespeare's not concerned with sex. Shakespeare's concerned with other issues that sex brings about. Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you think he's concerned with love as an ultimate theme, as an idea? You're all looking at me for clues. Does he want me to answer yes or no? Logan, what do you think?
I think yes, because you've been talking about true love or fake.
That's right. We see contrast between true love and fake love. So obviously he's concerned with love, how it works, when it doesn't work. It seems like we're dealing with a theme there. Gather your details. tell you, in my first serious teaching experience of Shakespeare was Hamlet. First time I dabbled in teaching a little bit of other plays like Romeo and Juliet and such, but my first serious teaching endeavor was Hamlet. And when it came to gathering details for any motif or theme, man, that play is so incredibly dense that if you had a motif, chances are really good that you could find 30 examples of it throughout the play. All the way from the unit of the single word to the sentence to the overall plot arc. That play is complicated and dense. Yours are not so, but still you'll find numerous examples. So if you're dealing with costuming changes in Twelfth Night, how many people seem to costume themselves in some way? Twelfth Night, who do you have? Viola does, definitely. Who else does? Yeah, definitely. She's hiding behind her mourning clothes, isn't she? Who else? Come on, who else dresses up? Malvolio, thank you. You've got at least 3 examples of people costuming. Oh, 3 is definitely a pattern. You've got enough. Merchant of Venice people, look for references to money. You can also look for references to animals. Shylock delivers a speech in which he asks, "Are not Jews human?" Think about how many animal references there are in Merchant of Venice. How many times are Jews compared to animals? Taming of the Shrew, look for animal references. When Kate and Petruchio are arguing, they're throwing them out left and right. Find those details. Find those examples. When you have a hypothesis, I think this is a theme, and then you have details about it, and you're looking at all that evidence. Remember, the literary analyst is a quasi-scientist. When you have all that evidence down there, then you're ready to start making some conclusions and ready to start writing. But with Shakespeare, you have so much data, so much evidence, so much material, that you just kind of have to poke around, say, I think this is a motif, gather some details, and then decide where it's going. Do not be afraid to say, nope, I only found one example of this. I guess I was wrong. However, trust your instincts. You're usually correct. Quick questions. Clarify anything. Evan. Tempest. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm sorry that I ignored the Tempest. Shakespeare sometimes likes to repeat the same plot events over and over. What plot event seems to happen multiple times in the Tempest, either successfully or unsuccessfully? I'm sorry? Oh, you've had 2 storms. That's very good. So you have had 2 storms. I hadn't even thought of that one. But I've got one that happens more often than twice. What happens more? Yes. Not just trying to kill each other, but trying to take power from each other. So trying to depose somebody, right? So how many people are deposed? Well, it seems like Prospero is deposed. Sycorax the witch is deposed. Who else is deposed? Caliban attempts to depose Prospero from the island, and then there's an attempted Alonso, right? 4. So 4 is more than 2, probably more important. A repeated plot pattern can be a motif. Other questions? All right, so here's what's going to happen. Before we get into what's going to happen, I need to talk about the group activity. So take out that sheet if you have it. If you don't have it, then look on with somebody who is a little bit more prepared for class than you are. Look at the assignment. First of all, let me draw your attention to number 1. Use the critical commentary in the Oxford School Shakespeare to help. Please do. When I read Shakespeare, maybe about half of what I interpret, half of my conclusions are drawn purely from my own reading of the play, and the other half are drawn from me reading other people's interpretations. There's nothing shameful in that. We're supposed to be a community of academics helping each other out. And that's why I want you to have these copies. So read or reread or scan through the commentary sections. Chances are good that they'll talk about themes and motifs. Use some of the material they talk about. 2 and 3 are pretty obvious. In number 3, the theme, I would like you to develop ideas that you did with group activity number 1. So feel free to develop the thematic conflict from group activity number 1. You've already received that back. And if you like that thematic conflict, then develop it more. If you think, no, that's not really a good one, I want to change, then you may change. but pay attention to group activity number 1. Now it's 4 that I'm changing. So if you want to write down the changes here. Write a short analytical piece in which you explore one of these two, the theme or the motif. No, I want you to explore one motif. You must explore a motif, and you must show me how it develops a theme. So that writes your literary analysis claim for you. In this play, Shakespeare uses this motif to explore this theme. That's what I want. Everything else is the same. Some people read number 1 to mean that you could only look at Act 3. You can draw examples from anywhere in the play. So for the remainder of the class period, I would imagine that you might take most of, if not all the time, to talk with your group and to talk with me. However, if you are writing at the end of the class period and you're on board with it, fantastic. It's due tomorrow. You may handwrite. Since you will probably start with the handwriting, I don't need you to switch and type it. You may type it if you wish. But bring it to me tomorrow. It should be relatively short, a couple examples, and you'll be good. No, because there's no word count on this. Anything else? All right, you're good to go. Gather into your groups, and I'll come around and help.